Plated Traditions channel. Welcome to the Plated Traditions channel with your host Kendra Moses. This is the Plated Traditions channel.
Hello, welcome to the Plated Traditions channel. My name is Kendra Moses, and as always, we have our resident chef Kai off camera. In our previous videos, we've been covering the language of cooking as it subsequently relates to the language of learning. Today we want to discuss the different types of learners from a Plated Traditions point of view. There's one very important thing we want to make sure that we impart to anyone learning culinary arts or any subject, is that there's no wrong way of learning. Is the only addendum to that statement would be it's wrong for you to try to learn from a point of view or a perspective that is not conducive to you. We all learn in different types of ways, in different forms of fashion. Some people are more audio. Meaning they need to hear everything that's being taught to them. There are people who are more visual, who need to actually see things in the text form. They need to see the words, and they need to read it in order to absorb what's being taught to them. There's people who are more visual, who they need to actually see things done in front of them and almost like a hands-on capacity. And then there's the people who are like fully hands-on. They need to experience the act of what's ever being taught to them. But for the Plated Traditions point of view, we've only discussed 3 particular learners, and these 3 learners are not actual scales, like one is not better than the other. They're just particular ways or observations that we've seen and noticed for how people particularly learn and grow in the kitchen setting. But there's no wrong way of learning. The only time it becomes wrong or flawed is when you're trying to learn a subject in a way that's not going to benefit you. I know there will be times where you will have to experience, because the way an instructor teaches you, you will have to experience one particular way more than the other, and that may be beneficial to you, and that may cause you some headache and grief. But we just want to make sure that when the time comes, if you can get any type of supplemental instruction as far as what you're learning, make sure you do that. Plenty of ways, especially in culinary arts, that you can achieve this from all 4 aspects that I mentioned. We've broken these learners down to 3 basic learners, and these certain types of learners always have the potential to go to different heights, and so it's not necessarily a scale as far as the expectations of the learner. It's just the way that they particularly or typically learn. Make sure they're being understood from an instructor's point of view. And a lot of times, even though we don't particularly like to label things, and the Plated Tradition way is more helpful, we found, for people to have something they can relate to. So these 3 particular learner types we feel have expanded a generalization for 3 categories that can be attainable or that can be relatable to our prospective learners. We have the apprentice, we have the observer, and we have the perpetual guest. The apprentice is a type of learner in regards to cooking that has had influences close to them, not necessarily familial, but maybe has had some sort of hands-on or in-house experience, even if it's in like a restaurant setting, if not just a home kitchen setting. These types of learners may have teachers or people who are actually guiding them along the way that are in a professional capacity as far as cooking and the culinary arts. So the apprentice learner is basically a learner who is really just being mentored and guided rather professionally, even though it may not be in an institutional setting, but they still have a high level of knowledge that they've been able to obtain, like I said, from a professional, and it could be a family member, it could be a close friend, or it could be just from an experience of being around a professional kitchen or commercial kitchen environment. And they've been actually guided along the way, step by step, being taught different terminology, being taught different techniques and skills, and which they have taken to heart and taken in hand. And these are what help them build up their skills, their confidence, and their overall achievements in the kitchen setting, whatever that kitchen may be. The next learner we have is the observer. Now, I am more related into the observer category. The observer is someone who's basically been watching people who've had culinary strengths, if not culinary education or culinary job experience. The observer is in the kitchen. Most of the time, this is a residential kitchen in which they are just there and watching every single thing. The observer is the type of learner who pays attention to things that others may not pay attention to. They're not necessarily being taught verbatim the skills about learning and cooking, but they are paying attention, and the people who they are observing are usually the types that share in regards to a simple tip or a trick or something here and there. And the observer usually has the capacity and the want to learn and develop their skills so they could be able to be this next level cook or this eventual cook, so to speak. So they pay attention to every single aspect. The people who they're observing are most likely close friends and relatives, and most likely have a intermediate to high level experience in the kitchen setting. It doesn't have to be a commercial kitchen, most likely it's not, but they do have a great deal of experience when it comes to dealing with food, dealing with the kitchen area, and dealing with culinary arts, even though it's not on a professional basis. Our last plate of traditions focused learner is what we call the perpetual guest. They're very interested in food, but they're not very interested in the execution of preparing the food. They may be from a household where they may have elders or someone else in the family or in the environment, their community, what have you, that has always had an interest in cooking. And the perpetual guest may have would-be mentors who prepare items of foods around them constantly. They might even share a tip or trick or two with them. And our perpetual guests may or may not receive that in the uptake based on their level of interest in cooking. So the perpetual guest may actually even come from an environment where the elders have made themselves the predominant cooks for that household. They have declared themselves the breadwinners, ergo the bread preparers. And the perpetual guest, being that type of learner, has decided to respect their elders in that regard. So they have become accustomed to just having food prepared for them. Maybe on a daily basis, maybe a predominant amount of time, and the other amount of time maybe be spent eating out or having meals that they prepare for themselves on a more minuscule level, or done in an act of basic desperation. The perpetual guest is not to be presumed to have no cooking skills whatsoever. The perpetual guest is rather someone who has a less interest in the preparing of food rather than the consuming of food. These people may actually also be people that the observer and or the apprentice may have been affected by, as they have taught them something or observed something that the perpetual guest has prepared in past, functions or events and potlucks or what have you, and they have been inspired and have taken on the perpetual guest's dish and recipes to only be, now confused by the perpetual guest's insistence not to be that included in the kitchen or the culinary process either anymore or hardly ever. The perpetual guest is basically something we can attribute to a bit of folklore or a bit of, hallucinations for the rest of us. We're not quite sure what happened to that person who we've gotten that recipe or that culinary ideal from, but they have just decided that that won't happen again anytime soon. The younger generations will probably look at them and be quite dubious as they see our perpetual guests pushing them out the way for a plate of food now, as their sisters has increased and grown as far as not wanting to be a part in the kitchen environment as anything beyond a food consumer, or, as we've said it plenty of times, our perpetual guests. Plated traditions, they are not standardizations. Even with my many familiar influences, my love of recipes and cooking is something that was kindled within me. Right out of high school, I continued to expand my reach with formal training. I spent the early hours of the morning watching the sunrise over the mountains before my culinary classes began, an experience that allowed my increased expression of my culinary craft and my acceptance of my introverted nature. The Plated Traditions Recipe Journal is modeled to be adapted on self. You, yourself. Plated traditions are not based on having specific personality types or family dynamics. Plated traditions are made by all sorts. No matter where or how your plated traditions are derived, catalog them. The plated traditions ideology is that most recipes are standardized, but not most plated traditions, if any. In the end, I want us to value the importance of the day-to-day living, because that's what plated traditions represents. What happened through the course of a regular point in time in our lives that made us have a recipe, that made us have a meal that we passed on, a meal to be created from basically nothing, hardly any resources whatsoever. And how important we value this thing that did not come from opulence, did not come from wealth and fortune, but was valued enough to be passed down through the point of time and history itself. Because if we start to value those things, because it was important enough for us to keep on sharing it and to keep it alive, why are we almost underscoring it or devaluing it as something that's not as important as the great something or another that happened in this point of time? We should be able to still value the things that actually kept us alive, the things that actually kept our civilizations going, as opposed to events that have no winners, and these things that actually jeopardize our societies and civilizations, when we can be doing something that is just beneficial to the day-to-day. Having that knowledge of living within your means, unfortunately for most below their means, and still saying, this what made me survive. Not a massive skirmish somewhere in which higher ups are debating about property rights, essentially. When you keep your own history alive, your own family alive, your own civilizations going by something as simple as some raw ingredients that you were able to make something from, compose something from, and keep what was important to you alive and well. This is what Play the Traditions champions, those moments in life. Thank you again for joining us for another week. We hope to see you again next time. Bye-bye.